You and I are going wine shopping together. You can find a sensational bottle of wine for criminally low prices. Let's get started exploring and tasting new wines together. Alrighty, my dears, we have a fun one this week. We are going to learn all about one of my very favorite sparkling wines in the whole wide world. This is a region that I don't think is hugely on the everyday wine drinker's radar, but it should be. The area in general makes some really gorgeous wines. You can find great value there, but beautiful still wines, gorgeous dessert wines. But we are going to focus on the sparkling wines today as we learn all about and dissect Crémant du Jura. So this region, the Jura, is a beautiful mountainous region that is sandwiched between Burgundy and Switzerland. So eastern border of France, kind of in the center, south of Alsace. That's the Jura. We learned about another mountainous region in France in the Savoie White episode of BYOB called the Savoie, but this is south of the Jura. A lot of times, especially when you're studying for wine exams or just learning wine in general, a lot of people lump these two regions together. They are both very small regions, but they have some really unique characteristics that really set them apart from each other. This region has gained a niche cult following for producing excellent, unique wines made from non-mainstream varieties like Poussard, Trousseau, and Savagnin. The wine history of the Jura is pretty dang ancient, with Pliny the Elder chronicling the viticulture of the region in his Natural History Encyclopedia in 79 AD. Prior to phylloxera, the nasty vineyard pest that almost completely eradicated the vineyards of Europe, the Jura had about 50,000 acres planted to vine with 42 different grape varieties. After phylloxera, that came way down, and the number of approved grape varieties became 5. So those 3 grapes I mentioned earlier, Poussard, Trousseau, and Savagnin, as well as Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which makes sense given the Jura's proximity to Burgundy. Today, Jura vineyards stretch out over 5,000 acres. With this whittling down and focus, Jura wine's quality just keeps getting better and better. The Jura is a region where you'll find some higher altitude vineyards, most of which are between 700 and 1,300 feet. It has very cold winters and warm summers. The Jura does receive quite a bit of rainfall, which can be dangerous for grapes. It creates a lot of disease pressure. The Jura is sometimes described as the mirror image of Burgundy's Côte d'Or, but when it comes to soil, they're pretty much opposites. While the Côte d'Or is mostly limestone with some clay, the Jura has much more clay, which can be difficult to work with when it's rainy and wet, and then it dries out and hardens very quickly in the sun. The sparkling wine production is big in the Jura. It makes up for about a quarter of total production. This sparkling wine is known as Crémant du Jura. Crémant is a word that you're going to find in a lot of different French wine regions. It's a word that means that sparkling wine was made using the traditional method in that region and with that region's grapes. So you'll see Crémant d'Alsace in Alsace, you'll see Crémant de Bourgogne in Burgundy, and so on and so on. Now, Crémant is not to be confused with Crémant. They sound pretty similar, right? So this is a little tricky, but Crémant, which is spelled C-R-E with the accent aigu, M-A-N-T, is very different than Crémant, which is spelled C-R-A-M-A-N-T. So Crémant, again, indicating that the sparkling wine is a traditional method sparkling from the region. Crémant is a premier village in the Côte de Blanc region of Champagne. So it's also made in the traditional method, but you're not gonna find quite as much value as you will in the Crémant category. So that's Crémant versus Crémant. So let's get back to traditional method. If you're not familiar with what exactly that is, it is probably the most laborious, most technically difficult way to make bubbly or sparkling wine. So all of the bubbles are created in this exact bottle. Basically, this bottle is filled up with a still wine, it's completely fermented, complete wine, and then sugar and yeast is added to that wine. Sugar is food for the yeast, so the yeast gobbles all the sugar up and it converts it to alcohol and releases carbon dioxide, or bubbles. Yay! So that's all trapped in this bottle. Eventually, the yeast runs out of sugar to eat, it dies, and it sits in the neck of the bottle. This is what is known as lees. Every now and then, either by machine or by hand, the bottles are turned slightly so that it stirs up the lees a little bit, which gives these traditional method wines really lovely texture, lots of beautiful organic notes, as opposed to, say, a sparkling wine that's made in a pressurized tank. You can imagine it's a little bit less laborious, a little easier to put a still wine in a large pressurized tank and just create the bubbles in there. But it creates more of that angular, primary stainless steel kind of expression of wine, as opposed to more of the organic leasiness of these traditional method wines. You get lovely brioche notes and texture and moussiness that are just delightful. Clément du Jura, all 5 of those grape varieties are allowed to be used. The white Clément makes up a lot of Clément production. It's about 90%, and a lot of them are made using 100% Chardonnay. Rosé Clément, on the other hand, has to be 50% or more of a combination or all 3 of the red grapes, the Pinot Noir, Poussard, and or Trousseau. I found this bottle of Tissot Meuse Clément du Jura from Total Wine & More for $17.99. Very excited about that. So this wine is labeled Brut La Pièce. The Brut is an indication of how dry this wine is going to be dry, about 8 grams per liter of residual sugar. And then the La Pièce is a nod to the limestone formations found throughout the Jura. And also, as the producer says, to symbolize the rough and rustic climate of the Jura, which gives this wine its unique style. I like it. This is a blend of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. If you do want to try some more of those indigenous varieties that I mentioned, they make a rosé. And it's got both Poussard and Trousseau in it, and it looks lovely. And I'm regretting that I'm not drinking them side by side right now. It's a bummer. By the way, I'm filming this at like 8 in the morning and I have zero shame about it. So it's this gorgeous, kind of pale golden color, little glints of orange in there. Beautiful, tiny little bubbles. Can't wait to drink you. I just went in. Usually I do the nose first, but that's how excited I am to drink this. It's so good. On the nose, this is a wine that if I smelled it, I would probably know that it's traditional method because it has all of those lovely organic notes that we were talking about before. It has the brioche-ness. It's got marzipan. All of the fruit on here that's lovely and concentrated is like dried fruit, like dried yellow apples, dried pears. It's got lemon, but it's a creamy lemon. It's like a lemon meringue pie with that, little toast on the top. Almond, white flowers. I just love the brioche-ness on this. It's subtle, but it's there. You don't want too much, right? This is a good wine. Talk to people at your local wine store, by the way, because a gentleman at Total Wine & More came up to me and recommended this. I was looking all over the place because I can't be controlled in a store like that. We started talking about wine and he was like, oh, you gotta check out this Clément du Jura. And I'm like, always. So talk to the people working in your local wine stores because they know, and if you have Total Wine & More, it's a big chain. They have really knowledgeable people on staff there that are really excited to help you find the perfect bottle. So thank you to the staff at Total Wine & More for helping me find this. It's so good. So yeah, on the palate, those really nice, beautiful fruit notes. I'd say they're more powerful on the nose than on the palate. It's a little more delicate and moussy on the palate. It's light-bodied, but it has that nice, creamy, frothy, foamy texture. Moderate alcohol on this, yeah, 12%. Super chill. $17.99. This is great. This is drinking like it's double the price. I shit you not. Absolutely beautiful. I love the texture on the palate. High acidity. So this is a wonderful time to re-examine what grows together goes together. So again, this is something that we say when we're looking at a wine region and their wines. Typically, they pair very nicely with the local food. Now, the Jura is one of the largest cheese-producing areas of the world. So if cheese doesn't agree with you, I would suggest maybe avoiding it or bringing an arsenal of lactate because there is so much cheese here. A lot of fondue. Little après-ski with some Clément and fondue, absolutely. This is where you can find raclette. It's this cheese that's heated up so it's super melty and runny and they just pour it over these boiled potatoes. Yes. This is where you have Comté, Morbière, Emmental, like all of these different amazing cheeses from this region. There's a lot of ham as well and sausages. So it's very rich food, which you can imagine when it gets very cold in the winter, it's hearty, it's stick to your ribs. But then you want something nice and clean and fresh and high acid to cut through all that fat. If you have another rich wine, if you have a super rich red with all that rich food, the heartburn, the indigestion, I mean, it's probably still not great, but this washes it all down so beautifully and complements it so perfectly. And it's the perfect time to be discussing this. As we go into fall, as we go into winter, you can of course still drink white wine. You can still drink sparkling. It doesn't just all have to be red wine. And this is a perfect example of it. I would drink this every day of the freaking year, and I might. This is just, again, I love this wine. It's very good. I think this is a great bottle to have on standby for anytime you want to open some bubbles to celebrate, or just because you deserve it, because you work hard, or if you're taking it to a holiday party. The Jura is, again, not on everybody's radar, but this is a wine that I think across the board people are just going to love. They're going to think it costs more money than it actually does. And I will be getting several bottles to put on standby in my fridge, including the rosé. We should just meet back here and do the rosé again. But let me know if you have explored Jura wines before. What are some of your favorites? Again, look at the still wines as well, because there's some beautiful whites, beautiful light-bodied, elegant red wines that are made there. You can find some very pricey producers and some very pricey bottles of wine, but a lot of value is to be found in these regions, especially in the Jura. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about these bubbles. I hope you love this as much as I did. And if you don't, more for me. Just kidding. I think you're gonna love this wine. So until next time, I hope you keep exploring and enjoying new wines. Cheers.